Hello COMS 526 classmates, this is Betsy Wampler. It's great to be with you today and I hope all is well for each of you. I chose to present on chapters 6 and 7 of the book Creativity, Inc. by Ed Catmull with Amy Wallace. I chose these two chapters based on title alone. I had just done a cursory review of the text, but I liked these titles. I knew there would be something in there for me and the content hasn't disappointed. I've enjoyed the reading and enjoyed preparing this presentation. Ed Catmull talks about failure against the backdrop of Pixar making the movie Toy Story 3. I really enjoyed this. The Pixar films have been a great part of our family. My kids have watched them growing up. We love Pixar films and can say sections of dialogue from memory. And a funny story, when my son was just a few years old and my daughter was born and the baby was getting all the attention, my son told us that he understood how Woody felt when Buzz Lightyear came along. This has been a funny story that keeps getting told in our family, much to his continued embarrassment. Anyway, Catmull uses words like mistakes, misfires, meltdowns to talk about failures and says these were a part of the landscape at Pixar in making all these great films. He goes on to say that failure comes with a lot of baggage, and for most people he thinks it starts in early childhood and primary school, where we get it drilled into our heads that failure means you didn't study enough, or you slacked off, or worse, you're just not smart enough. Therefore, failure is something to be ashamed of and to be deeply embarrassed by. And even though we learn to recite platitudes, or he says parrot arguments about the upside of failures, we really don't feel that way, and that the experience of shame is deep-seated for most people. He rejects the idea that failure is a bad thing. He thinks failure is necessary. Not a necessary evil, but necessary. He thinks it drives creativity, and that without mistakes and failures, there would be no originality. He calls failing or failures a manifestation of learning and exploration. He references Pete Docter, which is a name that I've seen in the credits of many Pixar films. Pete Docter was the story developer of Monsters, Inc. and a number of other Pixar films. And he believes that story development is a process of discovery. It's trying new things and different things until you hit on what is right. Catmull calls this iterative trial and error. It made me think of a famous quote attributed to Thomas Edison, where he said something like, "I have not failed, I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Apparently, in inventing the light bulb, Edison had many years of trials and errors and failures, and the light bulb had many incarnations before it arrived at its final marketable product. So I thought that was a great response by Edison. Catmull says that we have to disentangle the good and the bad parts of failure. We have to recognize the reality of the pain that comes along with failure, but also see the benefit of the resulting good, and see it as an investment in the future. Catmull suggests that most organizations vilify failure and make people feel terrible. They seek to scapegoat somebody, and he thinks this squashes creativity and innovation. Because people are afraid of failure, they're afraid to take risks and try new things. Catmull says this is the politics of failure, and it impedes progress. He also says failure is difficult enough without compounding it with trying to find a scapegoat. He says fear of failing is a barrier to creative engagement. So we have to uncouple fear and failure. There's the event itself, which can come with disappointment, confusion, some fear, some shame, avoidance of future risk. But then there's the reaction to it. Do we bury our head in the sand? Do we tuck our tail between our legs? Our response is what we can control, and it's key. We have to learn to view failure as a chance to learn and grow, try to see it as a way to reach a new level of engagement, a way to go in a new direction and improve and increase our creativity, and to see it as a process of discovery. He says if we don't do this, we hurt ourselves. I think that's true. So Catmull proposes that in a creative organization, the best way to operate is to create an environment where people aren't afraid to make mistakes, where they're not going to get nailed for it. They know their team is going to rally around them, help them try to figure out what happened, and help look for new ways to go forward. He says the antidote to fear is trust. This has a lot of spiritual implications, doesn't it? We're admonished in the scriptures over and over again to fear not and be not afraid, and to trust. Fear can be created quickly, according to Catmull, and that's also true, but trust can't. So he says that leaders have to respond well to failure. They have to demonstrate their trustworthiness, be patient, authentic, consistent, and open. He says that openness should prevail in an organization, not secrecy. He doesn't mean sharing the kind of information that could be shared with competitors, but he believes that in an open environment, employees will have a sense of ownership and will be more invested in the outcome of the product or idea. Chapter 7 is called The Hungry Beast and the Ugly Baby, and it almost rides the coattails of Chapter 6 in that it's a discussion of the two dynamics that can cause or be a part of fear and failure. Catmull's referencing his experience with the Disney Corporation in the late 80s and early 90s when they were having great success with films like The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and The Lion King. And Disney had such success with those that its response was to grow and create a lot of infrastructure. They developed new sites and hired a lot of staff, but then these things had to be maintained until the next success came along. Catmull calls this the hungry beast and defines it as a large group or entity that must be constantly fed with new materials and many, many resources to keep it going. Contrasted to this is the ugly baby. It's the new idea. It's the next success, but in its infancy. He says that it's imperfect and fragile, that originality is fragile, and it needs nurturing and time and patience to become what it'll be. So that even though it'll be something great in the future, it needs a lot of time of not so greatness to get there. It's difficult for the hungry beast and the ugly baby to coexist at the same time. Neither one is all bad, though, according to Catmull. The beast can be a powerful motivator that keeps things going. It can be demanding, but sometimes demand can drive productivity. The baby, on the other hand, while it's a dream and it's pure and untarnished, can be needy and unpredictable, and Catmull says it can keep you up at night. Catmull suggests that the key here is to find a way for these two to coexist, and balance is the key. He says good management is necessary. In an organization, a creative organization, there can be many people and departments all competing to do different things. Even though they're striving for the same goal, they're pulling often in opposite directions. Without good management, no one wins. Catmull also likens conflict in an organization to the environment and ecology. He says without storms, things don't get cleaned out, and without rain, things don't grow. And he says it's the same in any organization, group, or relationship. It's how the conflict is managed that matters. So recognizing this and striving for balance is important. He says managers should focus on people more than ideas and support people, because the best ideas emerge when people feel safe and are willing to take risks. So he proposes the idea of intentional management, holding lightly to goals but firmly to intentions. He says that the new thing, the new idea, needs protection, but business as usual doesn't. I related to the content of these chapters a lot, as I've experienced both fear and failure in life, and I've worked in environments where people were scapegoated. I currently work in an environment where there's a lot of autonomy and freedom and support, and I see that it's better. People here are happy to be here, and the work product is good, and good things are coming out of my department. But I've worked in an environment where it felt like I was blindfolded. I once worked for an organization where that's how it felt, like you were walking down a dark hallway and you had to feel your way with your hands as to what door was open. There were politics at higher levels and a lot of secrecy. I didn't stay there very long, and they had high turnover of employees because of it. I can also relate to the hungry beast and ugly baby. Many years ago, my family and I wanted to build a house. This was a dream. We had saved money, and we built most of the house, did most of the work ourselves. my kids were involved, and this was back in 99, 2000. And we got our house built, and it was such a dream. Nothing fancy, but a great place to raise our kids. Then in 2008, my first husband passed away. And the house was approaching 10 years old, and right about the time a house starts to need real maintenance and upkeep. And suddenly the dream for me became the hungry beast. The house took a lot of resources and a lot of materials and efforts, and I was carrying that load by myself. So when I read this chapter, that was one of the things that I thought about in my own life. Also, I can relate to the ugly baby. I have a small business related to the sport of rowing that fundraises for the teams my children are on. It's a dream of mine to form a nonprofit and be a part of something that helps young rowers and fledgling rowing teams get the funds they need to get started. I even sometimes think about this master's program. I shared in a previous presentation how I'd wanted to do this and had tried many times. And yet sometimes in the juggle of life with work and kids, and I recently remarried, it can feel like it's another thing that has to be fed. So it's interesting how things start out as one thing and move to the other. So how about you? My question for you is, how have fear and failure played out in your life, and how have you overcome these? Or how have they played out in a work environment for you? I've included a bonus question. Can you identify a hungry beast and an ugly baby in your life? If so, what are they? So thanks for listening today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed being with you. Have a great day. Thanks.